Joined by a familiar face. Usually you hear him on the radio, on the airwaves, the 97.3 ESPN in South Jersey. Reaches all over the East Coast. But right now, he's zooming in with us, literally, to make sure that we discuss some things that are important. The incomparable Josh Hennig joins us. What's going on, brother?
My friend Scoop B, how you doing today?
Maintaining, man. Staying out the way and interviewing important people such as yourself.
Well, I don't know how important I am, but I do appreciate you having me on. I know you've had a lot of great guests on in the last few months, and I'm glad that you put me in that lineup. So I might not be the leadoff hitter, but I'm in the lineup. So
listen, all 15 guys on the bench, however many guys on the diamond, and how many on the football field all count. It's a collaborative effort. You've been part of the journey, so thanks for joining me.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Tell me something. When you look at Joel Embiid and his size coupled with his ability on the court, have you seen anything like it in the past? Do you see anything like it in the current?
Definitely not in the current, because of the fact that I think that most basketball people can agree that it's Joel's background that makes him unique, right? It's the fact that he didn't play basketball until his mid-teens. He was from Africa. He didn't watch regular American sports until much later in life. So he came to the game late. He learned the game late. Joel has said, my favorite player is Kobe Bryant. Well, Kobe's not 7'2", right? So it's like, so I don't know if it's fair to say he reminds me of anyone in the current game, but I will point to two players from the past that he makes me think of. One being Hakeem Olajuwon. Hakeem was the first guy I remember, personally at least, looking at and being like, my goodness, that guy could play any position if he really wanted to. I know people point to Shaq with that, but I always felt that Olajuwon was just so freakishly gifted as an athlete. The guy could do almost anything. I believe if Olajuwon played in today's game, he'd be the best player in today's game. I genuinely believe that. The other guy makes you think of Embiid, not because of his skill set, but because of his injuries, is Bill Walton. Bill Walton was a league MVP, an NBA champion, but he was injured so much. And it just makes you look at Embiid and say, and I know Doc Rivers said the same thing on a podcast last year. He said, I would love to see if Joel Embiid was healthy for one postseason. Well, the Blazers got Bill Walton healthy for one postseason, and they won a championship. So to me, I can't look at Embiid in the present because, no offense to guys like, Karl Anthony Towns, no offense to Anthony Davis, but those guys were raised in a different style of basketball than Embiid was. I think that's what makes Embiid so different from those guys.
Yeah, fair comparisons there. Interesting insight as well. Tyrese Maxey, he and Joel, when both are healthy, fit like a glove. The beginning of the season, did you expect them to gel as well as they did without having James Harden present?
I didn't think Tyrese would be scoring 50 points in an NBA season. I didn't think that. But I did think Maxey and Embiid had a chance to gel for a specific reason, which is Maxey is just a joy to be around. Everyone I've talked to around the Sixers says that Tyrese Maxey might be the happiest person they've ever met. And Joel is a guy who plays for the love of the game too. Joel is not out there just to collect a paycheck, right? Joel loves his family. He loves the game of basketball. He loves his teammates. And I think that they're both of them doing it for the love of the game, I think is what brings them together. And I think that is what's so different for Joel compared to like a Ben Simmons, right? Or a James Harden. Not that Ben Simmons and James Harden hate basketball or something I'm saying, but it's just a different mentality. And I've always thought that if Tyrese had a chance, he could develop into an all-star. I got to tell you, my man, I didn't think Tyrese would be an all-star his first year being the main man. I thought him and Joel would have a nice rapport maybe a year from now. I thought Tyrese Maxey would be what he is right now in 2025. And it just shows you that he's ahead of the curve. His evolution from Kentucky to now, I don't even know who to compare it to.
Are you ever able to sit back and ask what if Ben Simmons and the Sixers didn't end the way that they did? And if so, had he stayed, do you think they would have been NBA champs?
I would rephrase that what if to what if Ben Simmons wanted the same thing as the Sixers did?
Sure.
Because I think that there was always, and I'm trying to be as biased as possible about this. I always thought there was a huge disconnect between Ben Simmons and the organization in that the Sixers drafted him number one overall with the idea that this guy was going to pair with Joel Embiid and they're going to try to win a championship, right? I think Ben Simmons is not the same kind of person as Joel. They're different people. You know, Joel is the guy who drinks Shirley Temples. You know, Ben Simmons has a completely different lifestyle. And I think that while you can have guys with different lifestyles get along, I think in today's age, it's harder than it used to be, you know, with social media and all the stuff out there. So I don't know if Ben Simmons and the Sixers looked at each other the same way. I don't think there was ever good communication. And my biggest what if with the Sixers is what if Sam Hinkie finished what he started? You know, do I think that Sam Hinkie would have not drafted Ben Simmons? Of course, I don't think that. Everyone thought Ben Simmons was number one pick in that draft. So, you know, whether it was Hinkie, Colangelo, the whoever was running a team before they gave Elton Brand the actual keys to the car, whoever ran the organization during those few years, I think that the what if is what if you would have had some stability, because maybe Ben Simmons would have been a championship caliber player if there was stability. And we know in life, doesn't matter if it's sports or the real world, stability matters. Stability of who your boss is, who your job is, who your responsibilities are. These things matter. So I think for Ben, he walked into a situation and it was different than he thought. And I think the Sixers drafted him expecting someone different than they got.
$1 million question. Do you ever ask what if James Harden had stayed?
James Harden would have stayed, I think, yeah, because the what if would have been, what if James wanted to be here as much as the Sixers wanted him here? You know, Daryl Morey in his history, we know that about James Harden. He loves James. I mean, there's the joke that people make that Morey has a painting of James Harden in his house. There's that joke out there, right? You know, James Harden, I always felt like James Harden gave his all for the Sixers when he was here. I thought he put in every ounce that he reasonably could into trying to win. And you saw those playoff games like everyone else. Harden had 2 games where he was MVP Harden. But are we going to blame Harden because he couldn't put that level of effort up for the entire series? Sixer fan wants to blame James. I say the what if is, what if James got help? What if Embiid was healthy? What if Maxey had a big game in one of those games? What if, you know, when Jason Tatum wasn't scoring in game 6, right? Jason Tatum, what was it, like 14 minutes, I believe was? He didn't score at one point. What if Tatum went the rest of the game and didn't score? Do the Sixers win that game 6? Then they end up in the NBA conference finals. Maybe the what if is the Sixers could have been in the NBA finals if James Harden maybe had a little more help in that series.
Who won the trade between the Nets and the Sixers in your mind?
I would say the team that won is probably going to be long-term the Nets, because I think the Nets had to clean up mistakes. And I think that them walking away, they had a trio of Durant, Kyrie, and Harden. And I think them walking out of it with Mikal Bridges, to me at least, looks like more of a win than the Sixers walking out of sending Harden to the Clippers for assets. And I know those assets could still turn into something, and we don't even know what that even means. Like, for example, you know, you and I can go back to, and I'm not trying to go too far back because I know some of your audience may not be old enough. So I'm going to go back to, remember when LeBron left the Miami Heat? Did anyone ever think that the Miami Heat were ever going back to an NBA Finals ever again? Probably not, right?
No.
So, but they did. Not because we saw it. Did anybody see Jimmy Butler carrying that team to 2 NBA Finals? Of course, no one saw that.
No.
So that's what I mean about the Sixers. I feel like they're an incomplete grade. I don't know what to do with them. No matter what happens for this team, in the future, right? 2025, 2026, 2027. If we get to 2028 and we have an answer, I feel better about saying the Sixers might have done something. But as of right now, I like the fact that the Nets got Mikal Bridges. I think him landing in Brooklyn is massive. Bridges should have been a Sixer. He could have been a Sixer. The Sixers let him go. He's the kind of guy that makes teams better. And I'm sorry, but I don't care what the Sixers do at any point in the next year, 2, 3 years. I think that they don't have a tangible answer for the James Harden question. The James Harden question was a failed experiment, in my opinion.
Going back to Ben Simmons for a minute, when he was drafted by the Sixers in 2016, did you ever buy the LeBron comparisons?
Never. Because, and I'm not telling anything breaking news, but, for anyone who watched the documentary when Ben was at LSU, that's not LeBron. LeBron was a machine, and he still is a machine. LeBron is one of the only players I can remember that was ever all about everything all the time. LeBron is so dialed in to the business side, the basketball side, the personal side, the people side. LeBron is one of the most in tune human beings I've ever seen in my life. You may not always agree with what he says and does, but the man is infinitely, like, his IQ's got to be 200 or something. You know what I mean? The man sees and understands things about the world that average people don't. That's the difference. Ben Simmons is not that in tune. Ben Simmons, and again, this was at LSU and it was younger and more immature, but there was an immaturity about Ben Simmons coming out of LSU that was not present for LeBron coming out of high school. And in fact, I don't know if Ben Simmons has fully matured in his life yet. I think he's still a young man who is still learning about the real world. I think LeBron, because his mental aptitude was beyond Ben, I never saw LeBron and Ben Simmons. I think that was a lazy comparison. Oh, well, he's big. Well, so was Magic Johnson. Did you see anybody comparing Ben Simmons to Magic Johnson? In fact, I believe it. I think if I remember correctly, Magic is 6'9"? So, Ben is closer probably to Magic in terms of size than LeBron. And I think that was always a flawed comparison if people looked beyond basketball. Because at the end of the day, hard work beats talent every time talent doesn't work hard. And I think LeBron has been evidence of the one side of that coin.
Valid analysis by Josh Hennig. I think the Doc Rivers experiment in Philly was very short-lived. And I feel like the Sixers had more patience for Brett Brown than they had Doc Rivers. Like, I often looked at Brett Brown's stint with the Sixers, and it felt very Jeff Fisher in Tennessee. Like, if you could go back in time, would you have lessened Brett Brown's stint in Philly and given Doc Rivers a bit more? Or would you have kept things the way they were if you were in that position of leadership in Philly?
That's a great question. I think to stick with your Jeff Fisher analogy, I think the biggest difference is that Fisher at least got them to a Super Bowl.
Right.
Brett Brown never got out of the second round.
Mm-hmm.
You kept Jeff Fisher because at least he got you somewhere. At least he showed the ability. Brett Brown was kept here out of flawed loyalty. Brett took bullets for this organization when they didn't want to answer questions, when they didn't want to deal with the media. Brett was the face of the team during the tanking years. And I felt like the organization looked at him and said, we owe you. We ran you through the mud. We made you take all the bullets for us not dealing with the media, us not dealing with the fans at times. And Brett was looked at as a loser, not because he was a loser, but because he was coaching losing teams. And that's the difference. You can't win with some of those teams. You can't win if your best player is injured. You can't win in certain scenarios. So Brett, because he took the bullets, because he was there through the quote unquote lean years, the bad years, the tanking years, whatever you want to call it, Brett was there. And they felt this level of loyalty to him that he survived, right? He survived the tanking. He survived Hinkie to Colangelo Burnergate, right? With all the crazy stuff that happened with that. So it was like, well, Brett survived all these things. So we owe it to him, because we're also changing the roster on him every single year. Mm-hmm. Whereas if maybe they had fired Brett Brown or let him go, whatever verb you want to use, I don't care. We all know what it really means. Maybe if you would have let Brett go a year or two earlier, maybe you bring in a different coach and you never end up with Doc Rivers, and you never have to wonder, did they let Doc have a long enough leash? Because then maybe if they put somebody else in that position, maybe then they do get out of the second round. Because as we know, coaching is not the only thing that matters in basketball, but it is important, because guess what? Michael Jordan never won an NBA championship with Doug Collins, right? Kobe and Shaq never won without Phil Jackson. And by the way, Allen Iverson went to one NBA Finals, and Larry Brown was on the sidelines. I don't think those are coincidences.
A couple more questions. If you could go back in time and you were the Sixers front office, would you have reconsidered signing Jimmy Butler over Tobias Harris?
100%. 100%. Because if you go back, and I don't remember the name of the podcast because at the time, but I know it was Chris Haynes' podcast. Jimmy Butler had that like hour-long conversation with Chris Haynes, where they're drinking wine and Jimmy's just being Jimmy. And I remember as a producer here at 97.3 ESPN, when I was only on the air on the weekends, but during the week I was producing for shows, and I had to cut up all that audio. So I had to listen to the whole podcast, cut the audio, have it set up for the hosts. And I remember we used that audio for like a year because it was so insightful. Jimmy wanted to be here. He wanted to be in Philly. He loves Joel. But the Sixers mistreated him. They picked Brett Brown and Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler. They didn't sign Tobias Harris instead. Tobias Harris could have still been here, and Jimmy could have still been here. They didn't have to be one or the other. But the organization did not like taking the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands and putting it in Jimmy's hands. And because Jimmy and Brett Brown had that clash, right, where they had a disagreement, they had a contrast, shall I call it, of basketball vision. And I think if the organization would have taken Jimmy, kept him all those years ago, I feel comfortable saying they would have won the Eastern Conference. Maybe not an NBA championship, but they could have won the Eastern Conference. Because guess what? They were all those bounces, Kawhi Leonard, right? Off the rim, back of the rim, into the basket from going to overtime. And who knows what happens in overtime? Do the Sixers win in overtime? Do the Raptors? We will never know. But at least if you would have brought Jimmy back, it would have been in good faith to say, we were this close. We didn't get it. Jimmy, you're a part of this team. We want you to be here. But the organization made the mistake to send Jimmy packing, take Josh Richardson in return, sign Al Horford, which ended up being an absolute disaster. And now to this day, the Sixers, they have no benefit, no win, no value from that situation. The Sixers completely got roasted in that scenario. Because guess what? Jimmy Butler is putting an amazing career together in Miami. And is Josh Richardson going to be in the league in a couple of years? I have no idea.
Well, you answered my next question. I was going to ask you if you thought Al Horford stayed too long, but you kind of answered that already.
He should have never been here. He should have never. It was one of the weirdest things, my friend. Like, I remember the whole philosophy to this day. I'll never forget it. Well, you know, Al Horford plays Joel Embiid really well. So let's take him away from our rival so he can't play Embiid well. Just because someone functions well in one area doesn't mean they're going to function the same way in another arena. Okay. A Lamborghini is great on the highway. I'm not taking it off-roading. Just because a Hummer is great for off-roading doesn't mean I want it on a racetrack. You got to know that Al Horford had success in certain environments. He was not a SUV. He was not a guy who can do everything. Al Horford had limitations. He should have never been a Sixer.
I got you. Josh Hennig, 97.3 ESPN South Jersey, joining us here today. Last question, and then I'm going to get you out of here and off the hot seat. Philadelphia is your region. Have you ever given thought to your Mount Rushmore of Philadelphia athletes? And that's across the board, not just basketball. If you have it, who would they be?
Wow, that's... See, now this is where I would probably get in trouble with some people in my own region, okay? Because to me, greatness is not dependent on championships, okay? So this is where, like, for example, just because the 74 and 75 Flyers teams won cups doesn't mean I need Bobby Clark on my Mount Rushmore, okay? Just because Allen Iverson didn't win a championship doesn't mean he isn't on my Mount Rushmore, right? So I put Allen Iverson as one of the four, no matter what.
Okay.
Allen changed the city. The city did not care about basketball before Allen Iverson. Between when Barkley left and Allen showed up, there was nobody cared. I mean, Dana Barros scored, 50 points that one night, and there was like 5 people in the building that game. Like, no one cared about the Sixers. Clarence Witherspoon, nobody cared about those teams. Allen Iverson changed how people looked at basketball, and there's an entire generation of people. They identify Sixers basketball with Allen Iverson. Okay. So another generation identifies Sixers basketball with Dr. J, right? So to me, the difference, though, between Iverson and Dr. J is Iverson was also a cultural impact. He didn't just change basketball. He changed culture. So to me, Iverson has to be on the Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
The other 3 are debatable because, for example, Donovan McNabb has the most wins as a quarterback in Eagles franchise history. But Randall was the forerunner for people like Donovan McNabb. So if we're to neutralize both of them and say they both kind of cancel each other out, then you put Brian Dawkins on that Mount Rushmore. Brian Dawkins is one of the greatest safeties of all time. He's got to be up there. He was a game changer. He's a people changer. And by the way, he changed the Eagles organization with the community. Brian Dawkins was the first guy since Reggie White to go out into the community and do things in the community regularly. Right. Not like the team is telling you to go and show up for a photo op, right? No, Dawkins, Reggie White, these people really cared about people in the community. Like, Deshaun Jackson, the same thing. People don't know how much Deshaun Jackson did in the community. But yeah, Iverson, Dawkins, those are my first 2 I put on there.
Okay.
The other 2, it depends on. I mean, I guess you got to put Mike Schmidt on there because he's the greatest third baseman potentially of all time. Multiple time MVP award winner, won a World Series with the Phillies. But I got to tell you, that guy, Bryce Harper, he's elevating in popularity in the city. But if we're going off a resume, I think you got to edge Michael Jack Schmidt onto the Mount Rushmore for now.
Okay.
I think that, if we maybe have this conversation in 5 years, it might be Bryce instead of Schmidt.
Okay.
I'm just putting it out there.
Okay.
The 4th guy I'm going to put up there because there's nothing against the Flyers, but I think that there's too much argument about which Flyer would be up there. Because like I said, the championship teams were in the 1970s. The 1980 teams never won a championship. They're very popular. The 90s teams never won a championship. Very popular. And since then, if you're telling me the best player in the last 23 years is Claude Giroux, I'm out on the Flyers. I'm totally out. So to me, I think you got to put another player from the other teams up there.
Okay.
And that's where Jason Kelce comes in. Because Jason Kelce may be the most popular Eagle of all time. The dude literally has businesses here in South Jersey putting up signs in their windows saying, "We love you, Jason Kelce, do not retire." Jason Kelce can go anywhere he wants, and he is like a god among men. And it's not because just he's a football player. Not because he's going to the Hall of Fame one day. It's because of who he is as a person. Kelce is the kind of guy. Let me tell you a quick story before we get going.
Okay.
I'm not gonna name who because I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Okay.
But there's a business down here in South Jersey that Jason went to have lunch with his family, his wife Kylie and their daughters. And the business wanted to offer him a free meal. And he said no. He said, "I can afford this meal. Someone else might not." He said, "Instead, what I want you to do is you're going to let me pay for this meal, and you're going to take a picture of me and put it on your wall in this restaurant so everyone can see that I came to your establishment," because he said it was that important to him. And then when he left a $100 tip. Did he have to do all that? No. But it's just one small example of the kind of human being he was. So I think maybe I care about the human interest side a little bit too much, obviously, but to me at least, I think who you are in your community, who you are for the people outside of the field matters. So that's why for me, it's Iverson, Dawkins, Kelce, and then just for sports conversation, it's Michael Jack Schmidt. That would be my 4 as of right now.
Okay.
So something could change. I could always put Bryce Harper up there.
Okay. All right, we go with that. Brother, you're off the hot seat. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Make sure to check my main man out, 97.3 ESPN in South Jersey. A wonderful guy and a guy that knows how to pick good restaurants, I might add too, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend.